Bonjour, bonsoir, mon ami. It is Jonathan at the piano lesson. Thought I'd get my beret out just for a change. I love berets, but I always lose them, so I never wear them. But then I thought, well, I could wear them in my house, and then I wouldn't lose them. So there you are. Hope you guys are doing well and have another fun-filled show for you today, and all kinds of interesting tidbits, things that I find amusing and fascinating and beautiful about music. Music is beautiful, and that's a word that we hear too seldom. But we're doing this because we want some beauty in our lives. That's the one thing that we want. We want beauty. And music is not only beautiful, but it is actually a reflection of what is already in you. You. You are music. You are music. And so the music reminds us of what is already inside us. Otherwise, we wouldn't enjoy it. It's the same reason why drugs work. Why do drug companies make so much money on drugs? Because they're actually selling back to you what is already in you, in your brain. The drug would not work if there was not a receptor of some kind in the body to receive the drug. So it is an effect in you. And likewise, music is you. And now a word from Yamaha's Pocket Track. This is something that's not even made anymore, but I've been using it on my little jam sessions, and it's quite a nice little recorder if you find it anywhere. The best thing about this recorder, well, what's the best thing? The best thing is it sounds good, I guess, considering how tiny it is. But the battery, it runs on one AAA battery, and this battery lasts forever. I am shocked at how long this battery lasts. And a ton of recording time and all kinds of interesting features. I'm not going to go into it. You can just kind of Google it. You can't find it anymore. And just a warning to our viewers and listeners, this show does not have any fancy graphics. It does not have lots of links to other websites. We're just talking about music. I'm going to use the blackboard, and you know, that's just very, very low tech, okay? So what are some of the things I've been thinking about? Well, we're going to talk about some interesting tetrachord relationships and in diminished scales, and we're going to talk about a tune, All the Things You Are, which really is quite fascinating. And just years of playing a tune, you make some observations, and you keep coming back to the same tune, and you realize, oh wow, I didn't realize that. And that's the fun of music. And also, I would just share a little observation that I have about music in general, because I've been enjoying performing live, and I haven't really done that much of it over the years. I used to do it quite a bit when I was much younger. And how much I enjoy it, how much I enjoy playing for people who want to hear music, and kind of wondering why and lamenting the fact that music has changed quite a bit over the years. And I think I could distill music down to three people, three trumpet players, jazz trumpet players, that are icons, and each one representing kind of a different ethic, a different mindset. So the first one is Louis Armstrong. And the reason I think of Louis Armstrong is because he was the consummate entertainer. There was no one more entertaining than Louis Armstrong. And of course, he was a great musician, right? But he, you know, when people thought of jazz, they thought, Louis Armstrong, right? And then something happened, something changed, and that person was no longer Louis Armstrong. That person became Miles Davis. And now they said, oh, when people said the word jazz, they thought, Miles Davis. That's what jazz is. Well, what's the difference between Miles Davis and Louis Armstrong? Well, I don't really think of Miles Davis as an entertainer. I think of Miles Davis first and foremost as an impresario. So what do I mean by that? Well, someone who really put bands together. Yeah, he wrote songs and made records and all that, but even when his bands rehearsed, my understanding is that he never even really rehearsed with them very much. He would have them play, and then the night of the show he'd walk on, because he wanted, I guess, that sense of spontaneity. But he was really, to me, more concerned with promotion, although he happened to have excellent sensibilities in many ways, right? But that's the main difference. And I think there was some disagreement between the Miles Davis camp and the Louis Armstrong camp, because I don't think the Miles Davis camp had a very high opinion of Louis Armstrong. I think they kind of looked askance at him and thought of him as sort of an old fogey and perhaps someone that didn't really represent black musicians in a way that they wanted them represented. But then something else happened after Miles Davis, and that was Wynton Marsalis, another trumpet player. Why is it always the trumpet players? You know, there's a lot of great musicians, but it's somehow the trumpet players always manage to be the icon. You know, you don't think of piano players really. Maybe back in the day you might think of clarinet players. I think the clarinet used to be like the trumpet or the electric guitar, you know, now, but somehow trumpet players just end up being the guy. And I remember when Marsalis became the guy, and I remember there were a lot of bad feelings about that because they didn't really feel like that was fair, because A, they had been working in the trenches for years and should have been recognized, but there was something about Wynton that people wanted to promote. There you go. They wanted to promote. Someone wrote a big check for Wynton. There's always a big check behind all these people somewhere. You know, you don't get to be famous without having someone with a big checkbook. And you know, he kind of looked the part. You know, very kind of sharp-looking guy in a nice double-breasted suit, and he was impressing people because he played classical music. He went to Juilliard. I don't know why they thought that much of Juilliard, because Juilliard didn't think that much of jazz, really. There were no such thing as jazz majors in school, really. You could minor in it, possibly, or do some graduate work in it, but the idea of doing undergraduate work and getting a bachelor's degree was not something that Juilliard did, or for that matter, Eastman, or, you know, my college, William Patterson College, which is now a university, did that. Try to think of the schools that did that. Maybe Manhattan School of Music, I guess. It had a jazz department, as far as I can recall, back in the day. But I don't think of Wynton as an entertainer, nor do I think of him as an impresario. And the reason I don't think of him as an impresario, or someone who gets people together, is because the people that tend to, in my estimation, that played with Wynton and played with Wynton now, setting aside his years with Art Blakey, which is something different, but were very much like him. They were just kind of clones in the way they thought. Whereas the bands that Miles put together, they were individuals, individual personalities. I can't think of one person that stands out as an individual that really is, you know, that typically you would see, especially now, jazz at Lincoln Center. You know, everything's sort of straight-laced, and I may get a lot of flack for this, but I've been trying for years to kind of understand that group of people, but I am not, I'm kind of left cold. I don't really understand what they're doing. It looks like jazz. It sounds like jazz. It kind of smells like jazz, but I just don't understand. I don't understand it. I don't feel like that group of people is really reaching people or making music. But that's just me. But those are the three, kind of the three groups, and that group I think of as very academic. There's the word. Academic. I don't want to say intellectual because that's not quite the word I'm looking for, but it just sort of leaves you cold. It's not anything that really reaches you emotionally. Miles, different. Louis Armstrong, different. But those are kind of the three groups. And something changed along the way as society changed, as the way people related to one another changed. I really think as people became less and less important as individuals. And what was more important is to have kind of one tyrannical person at the top of the heap, and everyone else was kind of nameless and faceless. Whereas prior to that, at least you kind of knew, it was almost like baseball, I guess. You know, in baseball you had people that were individuals that you knew, and of course I don't follow baseball that well, so someone will come up and tell me that's not quite true. But I just think of, I just think of that kind of across the board, whether it's movies or writers. I don't know. They're just the idea of people seem to be cut out of the same cloth and easily replaceable. So that's my quick take on what's happened to music. And we could talk more or less about that at another time. Let's talk about, I just want to share with you an interesting observation I had the other day about the tetrachord relationships and scales. So this is, our major scale, right? Our C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And if I take this group, this tetrachord, and I put it up here, well then I overlap the notes. In music, we call that conjunct. And there are scales that kind of can share the same note. And that scale, if you completed it, I suppose, that would be a Mixolydian mode. That's where you have the flatted five, right? But if you created a diminished scale, if I did that, if I took this group, right, and I put it below this group, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it down here, it's absolutely kind of like a Mobius strip. It just keeps going until you decide to end it, right? It's almost like a chromatic scale. But I skipped a note there. But this scale, like a major scale, this, you can't do that. You can't do that. It's not. You'll always end up with that closed-ended beginning, middle, and end sound, but not. I mean, it has a little bit of that tonicity, that finality in it. So I'll do it in C, but C, D, E flat, F, and then above that, I'll write F sharp, G sharp, A, B. So those are our two. That's our diminished scale, right? And those are our two tetrachords. And I could end it on the C. I could end it on the C or not. But see, that I could take that group C, C, D, E flat, F, um, I could just, that's the same thing. And I just thought that was an interesting relationship. And you can do that, you know, starting on any note, right, of the diminished chord. I could start it there and there. It's that tritone relationship. It's that you know, that kind of tritone relationship that you have there. Remember, each of these are minor. They're both minor tetrachords, but they're a half step apart, rather than a whole step that you have in the major scale. But I can't see. I just can't. I have to repeat that note again. Right? I can't just jump up here because that's a whole different set of notes. Not true with this. That's pretty interesting. Start on the. Here's another tritone in the diminished chord. Right. That's interesting. Thirds. That's interesting. Diatonic, seventh chords. Any of you guys do that? That's pretty fun. And again, the nice thing is that if you can do this, well, then you can certainly do this and this, because that's just an inversion of that, and this, because that's just an inversion of this, right? This is the same as this. It's the exact same thing, right? And we're looking at, again, these minor tetrachords bound by the perfect fourth. That's our perfect fourth, right? These are all perfect fourths from the lowest note to the highest note. If we looked in between the chord, right, and we made the diminished fourth, D, E flat, F, G flat. That's how you have to spell it. And then you can say G sharp, A, B, C. That's a diminished fourth. It does the same thing too, right? That's a group of notes that people don't often practice. So anyway, that was wanted to share that with you. And then the last thing I'll just kind of throw in here, which you might enjoy. Let's just make sure I'm not running out of time here. Yeah. So all the things you are. Jerome Kern. Jerome Kern died kind of in the early 40s, but what a brilliant man. I heard a video on, I think it was Stephen Sondheim talking about Jerome Kern, about how he used to compose. And apparently he used to like go through every possible chord permutation for like one measure, and then he decided that and then go to the next one. But the thing that's amazing about all the things you are is that it's almost like, I say almost like a 12-tone composition. Now, 12-tone music or serial music, which was kind of exemplified by Schoenberg, we're not talking about that kind of 12-tone per se. But if you count along the way, and I'll show you what I mean here. So the song 6, 2, 5, 1, F minor, B flat minor, E flat 7, A flat major 7, 6, 2, 5, 1, right? That's a series of up a fourth, down a fifth, up a fourth, down a fifth, up a tritone, and then C. So he starts in A flat and he goes to the key of C. That's unusual. But look at all the chords. Look at the root movement. F, B flat, E flat, A flat. Okay, then D flat, G, C, and then you hear C minor, F minor, B flat, E flat, A flat, and then you hear this A, D, G. So there's that tritone again. A, D, G, and then it kind of sits around there for a while. Then you get F sharp minor, half diminished, B, E. So what do we do? D. We already had the G here. Okay. F sharp, B, E. See that? Look at that. 4, 8, 12. He uses all 12 notes in music in the root. And somehow this C, even though, so ultimately, what key is this song in? Well, it's in the key of A flat. D flat minor, C minor, and then he has the B. Well, this B, it's not really G7, almost looks like G7, but you could think of it as G7 flat 9 possibly, because it's got the melody. The melody note is G. B flat, E flat. Yeah, so that chord, I just kind of put that into words, but that chord that you hear there, da, 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 that chord there, it's really G7 flat 9 in first inversion. It is not really B diminished. It's not a B diminished as we are all kind of taught, because of the melody note. And that's a special sound in and of itself. Remember, kind of last week we were talking about certain chords that really make a big difference. There's subtlety in there, but they're kind of often played wrong. We often misunderstand them or misconstrue them. Now I could of course use all kinds of other substitutions, right? I could use a lot more chromaticism and tritone substitutions, but already that's a mouthful. But it's an interesting tune because I can't think of a lot of tunes that go 6-2-5-1. But it's almost like a wind up, it's it's like this slinky going down the stairs. If you guys remember the slinky toys, it just sort of starts and keeps like a perpetual motion machine that just keeps going and going. 6-2-5-1, then 4, and then 5 of 3, and that 5 of 3 is the tritone, if you want to call it that. It's hard to name things in music from D flat to G. It's 3 whole steps basically. We got to fudge things because music doesn't always allow us to describe things precisely, but you have to kind of talk around them. And then that C becomes 6 of, 6-2-5-1, 6 of E flat, right? 6-2-5-1, and then what was formerly the 1 chord, A flat, is now the 4 chord of E flat. So it's like a mirror image, and then you have the 2-5-1 in G. So he goes he goes. What were we doing? Goes from A flat to D. That's the tritone, and G, and then down a half step. And how he gets back to the C. So how many keys does he go through? He goes through a whole lot of keys. That C chord, though, in my estimation, is the next most important chord in the whole song. Believe it or not. But he does go to the key of A flat, briefly to the key of D, then to the key of C, goes to the key of G by way of that, and then he goes to the key of E. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keys that he goes through. Was it? It must be 5 keys, yeah. E flat. I mean, well, yeah. And then E flat. Right. And then, so that's goes to 5 keys. That's enough. So for those of you who think you can't transpose, that's the song. Anyway, that's the show today. So I hope you guys liked what we discussed, and I hope you like my beret. And I don't intend on losing this one. Until next time, my friends, this is Jonathan at the Piano Lesson signing off.